Jim. Again, my name's Carly Harrington. I'm with the Knoxville News Sentinel, and we appreciate all of you being here. Our panel has graciously given us an hour and a half or so of their time to talk about one of my favorite subjects, and that's entrepreneurship and where we are and where we hope to be. They will share their insights on the subject, including their personal experiences and observations. And if we have time, hopefully we can answer some of your questions if you have any. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves because I think they can probably do that better than I can. So we'll start right here with Chuck.
Not ladies first. Chuck Morris. I'm the principal and founder of Morris Creative Group and the chairman of a startup in town called Circle. We're the nation's only gift registry for IKEA products.
It's a great elevator pitch. So Chuck and I are clearly two different classes of entrepreneurs, as you can tell by our outfits and the fact that I grabbed a beer from the ice chest earlier. My name is Patrick Hunt, a company called Fiveworks, and we help utility customers save energy.
Nice. I'm Mary Schaefer-Gill. I'm Vice President of Aries Energy. We're a renewable energy and energy efficiency contractor here in Knoxville.
So I'm Tom Ballard. I'm a serial retiree, I like to say. I've retired several times. Today I hold two positions. I'm with Pershing Yoakley & Associates, where I'm Director of Innovation and Entrepreneurial Initiatives, but I'm also COO of PYA's newest startup, PYA Analytics. So I actually am living the life of entrepreneurial startups as well as observing and trying to help them.
So when I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs just because of what I do for a living. And when I ask them about, how we're doing as a region, a lot of people use the word momentum. Sometimes there's a but in there, but momentum is a word that is often described to me. And so I would like to ask the panelists to kind of describe what you think the current environment of entrepreneurship is here in this region, particularly as it compares to a few years ago.
I'll dive in. I think momentum's a really good word. I think the fact that we're sitting here in the Knoxville Entrepreneur Center is a big deal. The city, the mayor's leadership, the chamber's leadership, and the people who made it happen, from Jim and the staff to all of their board are to be commended. And the collaborations they've created with Tech 2020 and with other economic development organizations in the region are really important. And I've been back here for a little over 10 years now after having lived here previously. And in that 10-year time period, it's like night and day. I came from Washington, D.C., where the tech sector culture at the time was just burgeoning, and you had a lot of large companies, a lot of startups, really, really exciting and engaging environment. And you're starting to see, obviously on a smaller scale, but you're starting to see the same types of things happening here, where you see serendipitous meetings that lead to a collaboration that lead to something really interesting and exciting. And so I think momentum is the perfect word to capture what's going on right now.
Yeah, I think I'm probably the oldest person in the room, so there's clearly more going on here than there was 10 years ago. And I think KEC is an example. I think the Anderson Center at UT is an example. There's more visibility going on. Where's Bill Brown back here? The Dean of Research, Research at the University of Tennessee is here. That says something about interest, and I think there's a lot more visibility. Startup Day, it's going to be our second annual. That's good, and to put in a plug, what was it? There are 380 registrants already, so it's really going. I think the other thing that probably I'm seeing more is better startups. And we saw it in the Valcourt team that this last fall. It was a much more advanced group of startups than I had seen in Valcourt before. And so it's not only that there's more activity, but there's also a greater level of sophistication and commitment, I think. So all in all, I think everything is on a lot better plane than it was before.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I mean, again, highlighting the Knoxville Entrepreneur Center. I mean, just having this here has been huge, and I experienced that with doing Startup Day last year, and participating in the Venergy program is a great resource for me. So just that startups are being valued more, and that the stories are being told. It's being local. Being a startup is much more than the local restaurant around here. And I think just shifting that mindset has certainly helped the momentum.
I think the energy's changed. I'm bullish on what's going on. I've lived here all my life, so I have the perspective of seeing lots of things come and go and fail and whatever. And I think we've changed the conversation. I think there are lots of people that are just kind of feeding off of each other. And KEC's Media Works program was a great example of that. Just seeing all of these young entrepreneurs and some not so young entrepreneurs come together and help each other. I think our history in this city has been a little bit territorial and setting up our fiefdoms and whatever, and I think that's changing.
Carly, there's one other thing that I think is changing, and I want to call out the Lighthouse Fund, because we now have our first local angel fund. That's important. That says something. And I think there's another one, and that's the fact that Ken Woody, who runs Inova Memphis, actually lives here. So even though it's a Memphis-based venture capital fund, he's living here and he's engaged in the community. And so those sorts of things, which are very important, that part of the infrastructure is beginning to emerge more than it has been.
Well, you mentioned capital. That's maybe a good segue into talking about that subject, because a lot of entrepreneurs will tell you they can't get funded here in Knoxville. So how do we change that, or what do we do there?
You can tell I grew up around here. I think we've got to continue working at it. Let me give you 2 or 3 reference points. The Chattanooga Renaissance Fund is about 3 or 4 years old. That was their first angel fund. They've now raised a second one. If you haven't learned to crawl, how are you going to begin to walk, much less run? So I think that it's important that we've got the Lighthouse Fund as the first fund. We've got to convince people to invest. This is not exactly a risky community here. We're kind of risk averse, and I think we need to champion that. But hopefully some of the visibility and so on will help with that. And then I think the third thing, and this is not an original idea on my part, and I'll give credit to Joe Cook Jr. of Mountain Group Capital out of Nashville, and they're one of the 10 Invescos. And we think of Nashville and we think there's a lot of venture capital money over there. And yet Joe would tell you there's not enough to feed and fuel the life science community over there. So what Joe consciously is doing is putting together networks of VCs from Austin, from San Diego, from the Bay Area, from Boston. So I think what we've got to also do is figure out how to network better. It's not easy. I'm not suggesting it is. But we're making some progress. There's some people that are concerned about it. And I just think we just have to keep working at it.
And we're talking about it.
That's true.
And that's something we didn't used to do.
Yeah.
So how did each of you get funding for your startups? Was that an easy process, or how? I mean,
we haven't gotten funding for our startup. We've been talking to some folks about that. It has not been easy. We've bootstrapped. We're lucky that we've got pretty significant revenue in our first year of operation. We were founded in January, and so we've been able to bootstrap this year. But we want to scale the business pretty aggressively, and that's going to require some capital. Our biggest challenge in that is really twofold. Raising money is a numbers game. There are 100 reasons why an investor would not invest, and a very small number of reasons why they would invest, and you've got to find the right match. It could be timing, it could be the subject matter expertise and their level of comfort with it, it could be they've had a recent tax event that now is going to prevent them from doing something, so they've got to protect some assets. It could be a host of things, but it's all about finding the right timing and the right fit. So that's one. The second thing we faced is our area of focus is in a highly regulated national industry for utilities. We sell our software to utilities to help customers save energy. And that's really counterintuitive, by the way. Most people don't believe that energy companies want you to use less energy. They do for a variety of reasons. And it's really hard for people to wrap their heads around that concept. And they're not comfortable and familiar with that industry, and so it makes it challenging. So we've really had to expand our fundraising efforts to Boston, Chicago, Denver, Silicon Valley, and Austin, where there are concentrations of what we would refer to as clean tech capital. And a 5-minute conversation there is like a 5-hour conversation here in terms of understanding the business and wrapping your head around the model. And that's huge that, as an entrepreneur building a business, you don't have 5 hours to educate somebody on the model. If they don't get it, it's not going to be a good fit, and you got to move on.
For us, bootstrapping, absolutely. And then just to add kind of to what Tom said, people really are risk averse here. And so, being in the renewable energy industry, we've been fortunate to have early adopters who, once were clients, still are clients, but have also transitioned into being investors for us too. They know what we do. They're confident in us, and they have helped build Ares Energy as a company and invested in more projects and built our brand.
And dovetailing back to the first question about what's changed, the accelerators like MediaWorks and programs like Startup Day, they exist specifically to de-risk the business, right? To get them ready to take on capital or get them ready for growth by eliminating the risks or the hurdles or the challenges that would prevent them from achieving that, so that the investors have a higher level of confidence that they're going to get a good rate of return on that investment. And so that addresses both issues. It's not a direct capital issue, but it's really critical to preparing companies to take on capital.
In the case of Pershing Oakley and Associates, people may not realize it was a startup 31 years ago, and it's actually started 5 companies itself, 4 of which are still part of the PYA family. And the model is different. It is all self-funded. So some of the owners of PYA invest in the startups, and those who are part of the management team invest. So you've got sweat equity in it. So I've got, one of the reasons I keep retiring and doing, I am one of the owners of PYA Analytics. So, you've got equity in it, you've got some of your sweat in it, you're going to help grow that business. But it is a model that has never gone to the venture capital world. It's all self-funded.
Yeah, I've often heard people say, well, when I talk to potential investors here, they want to see, okay, well, when's my return? They want to see that timeline of return, whereas if they go somewhere else, it's more about, well, what's the potential? And it's just a different way of, looking at it.
That's right.
So we talked about capital. What are some of the other critical issues you would say for startups?
I think mentoring is important. A community, Jim Biggs could probably get on this. You can't have enough mentors. Can you?
No.
Okay. I thought maybe you were gonna. I saw you raise your head, and I thought maybe you were going to disagree.
I never disagree with you, Tom.
Thank you. Unlike my mother-in-law, who never agreed with me. But anyway, if you can't give money, give your time. And that's one of the messages that I think needs to come out. Everybody can use help. Everybody can use guidance. So we need more mentors here. And then something that I've heard from a lot of startups, it's tough to get your first customer here. And so finding customers locally, companies that could actually buy your product. They may not be able to invest in your company, but maybe they could buy some of your product. So buy locally, mentor, let's continue to grow that. Those are 2 things that I hear fairly regularly in addition to the need for capital.
Our first two customers are in the Midwest. They're not here. We're not really focusing on the Southeast because the states don't mandate that their energy companies help their customers save energy here. Not yet anyway. Mississippi just came online this year, and that's likely to continue because we have to reduce greenhouse gases and carbon emissions, and that's an important way to do it. But our customers are in the Midwest. They're really national, and event marketing is a major part of how we reach those customers. Traveling to conferences and so forth. Many of those are held in California and Boston, and I was in Atlanta last night, and I've been on the road probably for the last 8 weeks in a row. And so access to the rest of the country is a big deal here. Airfare, I flew our VP of Customer Success, who lives in Boston, to LA for a meeting yesterday, and it cost, I think, $350 round trip. And it was a direct flight, and she had a very comfortable seat. Last week I was in Denver. I had to go through 2 stops. It cost me close to $1,000. Now you repeat that every week and sometimes multiple times a week, and that puts severe constraints on the capital that we have, right? We're bootstrapped so far. We're trying to raise some money. That's a really big deal. It takes up a lot more time, and it takes up a lot more money to get to places around the country. So I know that's been talked about, low-cost airfare and more direct flights for a long time, but it is really critical for anybody trying to do business across the country or around the world.
I'm like Tom a little bit in that I've got the perspective of an existing business that has made investments in startup, and we have different problems. Morris Creative built its business here over 24 years with local companies doing marketing and public relations. Circle is finding its success in a lot of the cities that are within about half a day's drive of Knoxville. So the opposite problems. Morris Creative is finding more success from a scaling standpoint on the West Coast, believe it or not. So we're doing some business out there, but Circle is going to, I think, find its success like you in other areas of the country. Not as much here.
Right.
So.
Well, Tom, you mentioned about, I guess, if not being able to invest, providing your time or even buying a product or service as a company. Mm-hmm. One of the things I've heard from people is, actually just having someone in the community kind of step up as in the private sector to kind of really take what we have here, what we're building, and take it to the next level. So how do we achieve that? What do you see as kind of the next step for entrepreneurship here? And how do we achieve it?
Well, if you look at other cities, and we don't like to compare ourselves, nobody likes to compare themselves to somebody else. I think there's several different models. I can look at Chattanooga, and there's not this overly charismatic individual who is driving things there. It seems like, to me, it's a group of people who have come together and say, we're going to move our community forward. Compare or contrast that to Nashville, where you have the larger-than-life Michael Burcham at the Entrepreneur Center there, who is kind of the face of entrepreneurial activity in Nashville and is kind of viewed as the guru of it. And so Christy, I see Christy Branscombe back there, and we were in Nashville earlier this week at the CEOs for Cities, and I was really struck by some comments that Carl Dean made in the morning session. And he talked about how, and John Meacham was also a speaker, and between the two of them, they talked about you got to recognize what your culture is. And so, and in their case, as Carl Dean, the mayor, said, our culture is healthcare, our culture is higher education, and our culture is music. And that's what we build off of. And they pointed out how that is the creatives in many respects. Carl Dean talked about the diversity that is Nashville today, brought in by the music industry, brought in by the higher education institutions. So I think it starts with understanding your culture, and it starts with people saying, what are we going to do to make a difference? And you could have this Pied Piper, I frequently like to say, or it could be a group of people making things happen. And I think it's got to be, I don't think there's a cookie cutter that you can use and say, absolutely, this will work in Knoxville versus Nashville versus Greenville, South Carolina, or whatever. I think it has to be what people can get around because of the nature of the community. So.
And what's authentic to us.
Do what?
And what's authentic
Yes.
for us here.
Yeah.
Be authentic.
Yeah.
So what is our culture?
That's a good question.
I've been trying to answer that question for about 40 years. I think R.B. Morris's poster says it best. We're the Bermuda Triangle of the Appalachians. I mean, it's just a melange of things. It's crazy. That's quotable. It wasn't my quote. No, I just think we have a great diversity here. And what was interesting to me, one of the things that came out of MediaWorks was the Tennessean article about the new tech startups in music are coming out of Knoxville. Yeah. That's kind of a fascinating thing to me. And I go back to two things. One is we're having the conversations. It's back to conversations. And we didn't used to have those. And the other is I think we have to sort of prevail upon some of our corporate leaders to say, I'll step up. If you go to the Nashville Entrepreneur Center, you will see the entire interior of that place logoed up. It's like they beat the door down trying to get in there to put their ATM or their cloud in the ceiling or whatever they have up there. So I think we need that. I mean, we need some visible and tangible ways for corporations, the larger corporations, to raise their hand and say, I'll invest here.
EO, by the way, is one of the names on those doors, Chuck.
Yes, and I have my pen here. I'm not sure how much this cost me to have it in here.
So I want to go back to the prior question because I can't answer the culture question. But I think there's a couple of things that are sort of critical to next steps, and I think the first one is already started to happen a lot, and that's the embracing the idea of failing fast, right? Getting in early stage ventures, figuring some stuff out, learning what you don't know, figuring out that it's not going to work, and setting it aside and moving on to the next thing, taking those learnings and turning it into something of value. And I think that historically, at least from and I've not studied this is just a quick observation, that we tend to bet big on a lot of stuff, and then we get focused on the failures as a community. And I can rattle off a few examples, but I think that's a mistake. I think getting in earlier stage deals and learning from them very quickly, and just supplying the very smallest amount of seed capital to test an idea and see if you can get product market fit. And if you can't, then you move on and you move quickly. So failing fast, I think, is essential, and I think that's starting to happen now where it didn't previously.
And to give somebody an attaboy or attagirl if you
For
tried
failing.
and failed,
Hell yeah.
as a pat on the back, be positive about you tried it.
That's right. The second thing is, we've got a lot of successful big companies here that some of whom have been around for quite a long time, and they're creating a whole level of sort of mid and upper management folks who actually have the wealth and the risk tolerance to do a lot of early stage investing. And I think we could have a very concentrated, focused effort with those CEOs and boards to get that class of employee to really get engaged with some of this early stage investing, whether it's through angel funds like Lighthouse or through Angel Capital Group or other membership-based angel organizations. That could open up a wealth of capital that we can't currently tap, or at least we haven't been able to. And so, Jim, that's for you.
Hey, Carly, it's also about I remember vividly in the first couple of years of the Haslam administration, the governor and the commissioner of economic and community development always talked about Tennessee in the top 10 in research dollars and the bottom 10 in creating companies out of that. And so when you ask the question, what is our culture? the University of Tennessee, Oak Ridge National Lab, and Tennessee Valley Authority are an integral part of the culture of this region. Now, so too is Pilot and Regal and Clayton Homes and Scripps. So I'm not ignoring that, but I think part of that culture of the future is, in fact, when they talked about the state's assets, they talked about research assets, and this is technology only. Talking about St. Jude, Vanderbilt, Oak Ridge National Lab, and the University of Tennessee. And the math I learned at Sam Houston Elementary School in Maryville said 50% of that's in this region, okay? So I think part of the conversation might very well be, how do we better take advantage of those assets? I've been at both places. I know the challenges, but I think that's part of perhaps part of the conversation. It's not the only part of the conversation.
On the flip side of that, to me, is being very intentional about recruiting the creative class.
Yeah.
And obviously I'm in that, and so it's sort of selfish for me to say, but Jackson Avenue has become kind of a corridor quite by accident, it seems. People just located there, but if you walk up and down the street, you'll see lots of creative class companies. And I think sort of nurturing that and being very intentional about continuing to build on that. We have an opportunity with the McClung site to do something there that reinforces that. Just being intentional about that, I kind of see that as the micro. You know, that's the threads of the community, whereas we've got these other big assets in ORNL that are the macro.
Yeah. You know, to your point, Chuck, those of you who may know Sheldon Grizzle, who's been associated with the Chattanooga scene, he made a really good point to me several years ago, and he said, to attract the creatives who may be part of the technology startups, and think about the creatives as the Bredesen Center students, and that's a great asset here today. They want the coffee shops, the music venues, those very sorts of things. So you can't just focus one way or the other. It's the whole ecosystem. And any of you who travel around this state, I would argue that Knoxville has any of the other cities in this state beat when it comes to the vibrancy of the downtown and the attractiveness of the downtown to create.
If you read Richard Florida, you would nod your head that is absolutely true.
Right. Well, and that's what brought me to Knoxville. I've been here a little over 6 years, and seeing the redevelopment taking place downtown and knowing that I could be a part of that was something that brought me here. And in addition to that, I am an urban planner by degree and passion, and so that attracted me. But that the city had taken on the Solar America Cities grant. So just that Knoxville was taking such an active role and wanting to be a leader in solar technology really attracted me to this area. And then, it's just gotten better and better. And so I think just wanted to add, I like using the word culture. I was going to say we really need to, do an inventory of our assets, identify those, and then figure out how we translate into culture and what we're looking to attract. And is it the creative group, or, who do we want to be here?
So in your travels or wherever, what visiting family from somewhere else, what would you say is the perception that people have of this region and what we are trying to achieve here in terms of entrepreneurship?
Carly, can I answer that from back here?
Yeah.
On that. So the mayor and I have just got back from the U.S. Mayor's Conference in Louisville, Kentucky. We were there 2 weeks ago, and just like we read and we all see that there is a buzz about Knoxville. There's no doubt. We read it, we get all these little accolades from all the different publications that are going on out there. There's also a buzz about the entrepreneur scene here, and we thought that was the case. But we went to Louisville and met with everyone, and we had mayors from across the country. They heard the buzz, and we were able to make some really great connections. You guys talked about. Venture capital and how to get more venture capital here. Part of that is networking. So while the mayor and I were there, we talked to Village Capital, we talked to Kauffman Foundation. They are the big venture capital people, and they had heard about what's going on in Knoxville. So we've been trying really hard to get them here for demo day. Of course, they have a very short period of time there to make that determination and couldn't be here, but you know, it's the same things that we see and read about, you know, our live music scene or how we've been able to renovate and revitalize our downtown. They're also hearing about what's going on with entrepreneurship in Knoxville. So I can just feel it and sense it, but it was so gratifying to go because we've all been working so hard on the KEC to try to create this atmosphere. But it was so wonderful to go and gratifying to see that other people had heard about this too. And there is this little buzz going on, and we've been, you know, making connections with Jim and Coffin and with Village Capital. So I think we'll see more of that happen. But people are, I think outside of our community, people are hearing about it. They are listening. They are interested. And they're wondering what's going to happen. They're trying to see what's the next thing going to happen in Knoxville because they're curious.
Sometimes we live in our bubble, so
Right.
it's kind of hard to gauge what people think outside of the region. But that's a really
Sometimes it's just gut feel.
Yeah.
I mean, if you believe in universal vibration, we've got a good vibe going on, you know?
So my experience has been a little bit different than what Christy described. You know, I mentioned earlier that I've been on the road a lot lately. I was in San Francisco for what's called the Emerging Technology Summit, which is an event for a lot of West Coast public utilities to look at what's new and innovative in the space of energy efficiency and demand response. I was at the National Renewable Energy Labs, like an ORNL, but for renewables outside of Denver for their industry growth forum. And that one was really interesting because they had speed dating for investors and startups, and I had about 8 or 10 sessions with folks. And
You had some dates, did you?
I know it surprises you. But really the first question is, where are you located? Knoxville. And the typical response is, I've been there once, or I've been through there once. What's that like trying to start a company there?
We purposely don't have Knoxville on our business card.
Really?
It's not something, and I will say that with what Tom's doing about, and talking about changing culture, what Tom's doing with Technovation and celebrating the businesses that we have here, I don't think we thump our chest enough for the rest of the world to go, wow, that's really cool. This is what's happening. I mean, we've got so many amazing things happening just in our area, but we don't celebrate them. We don't brag about them. And I think that we really need to just put them up on a pedestal, every single company, and say how great it is, because, you know, winners attract winners. And so I think by us talking about it and making it more public, and like I said, startup days and all those celebrations. I mean, that startup day was so awesome. I mean, it was like watching a TED video. I was just like blown away. It was nothing I expected. And that's exciting. And so I just feel like we really got to just pump up the volume everywhere with every company and every great thing that's been achieved.
I agree with that, and that's one of the reasons we did do that Louisville trip, because we did get to go there and we talked about local motors, and we talked about all the different things that were going on in the area. But you have to take advantage of every little opportunity that we get to go out there and spread the word. And thankfully, the mayor is behind that and understands that and supports us. He's really trying to push that. But it was great because we got a platform in front of all these U.S. mayors to talk about all the great things that are going on in Knoxville. So I think it has to be a two-pronged approach, right? We have to do it on the private side, but we as a government and have to push it from our side as well to try to get there. But yeah.
It's everybody working
Together.
off. Yeah, that's it. Absolutely.
the big C word.
Yes.
Yeah. So you know, the thing that's interesting about Silicon Valley is that there's just a ton of software engineers there. People have flocked there. They've, you know, semiconductors and software. They've made a ton of money, and they can continue to reinvest it, and they continue to do that. The thing that's interesting about Boston is really about clean tech, and it's about renewable energy and clean energy and advanced energy and all those related topics. When you get to the question of what's our culture as a community versus what is becoming our culture as an entrepreneurial community, I think maybe two different questions, and there's a couple of themes starting to emerge that go back to what Tom was talking about and sort of the intellectual capital that we have here in the research and education institutions, and transferring that to private sector development. One is 3D printing, local motors here on the square, Feats in Chattanooga, which is doing 3D printed shoes, and I heard on NPR this week that the defense they're working on 3D printing food.
Supplements.
Yeah, really,
It's great.
really weird. It sounded nasty when they described it, but
3D
still,
printed brains too out of a company in
and
Chattanooga.
body parts. That's right. And so 3D printing right now is massive, and most of the activity in the world is happening in the Tennessee Valley. I think clean tech and advanced energy is big. ORNL is doing a ton of work in building sciences and energy efficiency, and Aries is doing the work that they're doing. Our company, which was a spinoff of a 23-year-old company here that does national work in energy efficiency marketing for companies across the country. And there's a ton of intellectual capital around energy efficiency, renewables, biofuels, et cetera. So I think there's some themes starting to emerge. And of course, we got with Scripps Media and Regal and Jewelry Television, digital media, and the evidence by MediaWorks and the quality of the startups that went through that accelerator. And what they looked like at the beginning, by the way, and what they look like at the end was dramatically different. And I applaud KEC for that
Pivot.
for that work.
Pivot.
So I think trying to take advantage of those natural advantages that we have, take advantage of the advantages, is really, really important. And I think those three themes and maybe a couple of others that might emerge could be huge in advancing us, creating a nexus of opportunity that begins to sort of become self-fulfilling. I think is
I hear
important.
tech and media. When I travel outside, oh, you guys have lots of technology and lots of media. And a third coast thing.
I want to go back since we're to the Bredesen Center, and the thing, since I guess it was at ORNL when that one started. There is a subset of those students who are the brightest students in the world being attracted here, who want to be entrepreneurs. At last year's, and I guess again at this year's, Beth Papanek is one of those that's going to present. The team that won Valcourt this fall, again, 4 Bredesen Center students. Those young people are wanting to start companies. Where are they going to start those companies? Are they going to start them here? Or are they going to start them somewhere else? And to really just going to the micro level for this, as Chuck was talking about a minute ago, there could very well be a strategy that this community could put together to embrace those, because UT is being able to attract the stars to that program. So ride that wave in terms of come and get it, as was said by someone not too long ago, come and get a degree and leave with the company. I mean, and if we could get some of those companies here, just think what that would continue to do to what Christy is talking about in terms of the buzz out there for some of these bright stars. Because there's also the piece about talent and the talent availability. It's not just capital, and it's not just technology, it's also talent. And can we attract and can we retain the talent we need for the types of companies we want here? And obviously, Chuck, I mean, you're in the creative business, the technology space, others. Where do you get, and how difficult is it to attract the talent and keep the talent here that you want?
People are staying here.
Okay.
I heard somebody say to me the other day, or I overheard somebody say, that Knoxville was becoming like Asheville, and I was like, that's really interesting, because for so long I think we wanted to be sort of culturally diverse like Asheville, but I've never thought of us that way. But you walk around downtown and you look at all the shops and the people and the restaurants and whatever, and we've got a really interesting fabric downtown now, I think, that we didn't have even 2 years ago. And it's keeping people here.
Yeah.
They want to live and work downtown.
Yeah.
And live that lifestyle.
Yeah.
Providing those other extra things that people, when you're outside of work, that's what are you going to go do?
Right.
So we got to keep building that too. So you talked a little bit about strategy. How do we develop that strategy? And how do we get to a point where we sit down, we get the right people sitting down at the table and say, what is our strategy going to be? What is our vision? You know, I'd like each of you to maybe talk about what, you know, your vision is for entrepreneurship here in the region.
Yeah, the first part of that question, you know, that's probably outside of my realm of focus right now. You know, there are organizations like the city and like the chamber and Tech 2020 and others that are working hard to solve hard problems. And like every entrepreneur, they make mistakes, they have some successes. Hopefully we all learn from them and we get better and better at what we're doing. And the landscape changes. There are external factors that none of us can predict that we have to take into account. So that's, you know, having entrepreneurs and a KEC as a voice of entrepreneurs to continually influence that dialogue and that focus, I think, is probably the most important thing that can happen. But other than that, I can't comment on that first part of the question. Vision for entrepreneurship is, I think, at least for me, is what I talked about earlier in failing fast and seeing a lot of it. Like just an increased volume of activity, of throwing ideas up on the wall, seeing what sticks, nurturing it, and learning from those that don't stick, and celebrating the entrepreneurs that gave it a try, and getting them back in the game and getting back on that horse to try it again. And if we can just get a nexus of that kind of activity going, then you'll start to see a lot of major success stories start to bubble up out of it. So it's a feet on the ground, grassroots kind of thing that has to continue to happen. It's already started, but I just think we got to amp up the volume on it in a major way.
I think it's the South's mecca for entrepreneurship. I didn't say the nations, because we're not going to overcome Silicon Valley. We're not going to compete with Austin. We're not going to compete with Boston. But we could be the South's mecca because of a lot of what we have to offer. So if you have a vision that takes you there, and however many decades you want to say or years you want to say, then I think what you've got to do is decide on a brand, which we don't have. In this region right now, we don't have a brand.
Tennessee where energy begins.
Well, you could.
We could go with that.
There you go, Barbie. All right.
We worked on that one.
I knew
go
that
with
was
that.
coming. Yeah.
You know, you think about Chattanooga, and they're branded as the gig city, yet they want to be known as the innovation city. Nashville is healthcare IT, by and large. Memphis is med devices and logistics. I mean, we got a lot of opportunity here, but what we haven't decided is what one or two are we going to get behind and try to push so those become the building blocks to be the South's mecca for entrepreneurship. Again, what's going on in downtown is, I mean, you said it, Chuck, you're not having to, it's not that difficult to keep people here because they like what's going on in downtown. And let's face it, except for those of us who have allergies, the Four Seasons, the mountains, the lakes, all of that. So it's not that difficult to get people here. We've got a lot to offer. We've got challenges with venture capital and other things, but what we've got to do is get behind one or two things, not to the exclusion of everything, but to push some things because those seem to be the activities, the sectors, however you want to describe it. I've gone to preaching, I know.
Look at you there.
Yeah, I do.
And nobody's on the front pew either.
I am.
I'm going
I'm going to take the collection.
That'll get us.
That's a true entrepreneur.
But you know what Patrick said, though, I'm going to go back to something that's really, really basic. We have island ourselves. You know, our airport is, I can't even tell you how many times I've driven to Atlanta or driven to Nashville because it's half the price. Or it's a direct flight. It was actually quicker for me to drive to Nashville and take the flight half the price than it would have been to take 3 stops to get someplace. And so if it's expensive to get here, you know, this isn't a destination. It's not an easy, Knoxville's not an easy place to do business with because of the transportation. If we can connect that, and I think it's as fundamental, starting there, of just being able to have people have access to our city inexpensively.
But demand drives that, Harvey. I mean, we gotta grow the population. We gotta grow the business traveler sector and the leisure travel sector in order to make that happen.
Well, I think we really need that, you know, the top-down leadership. We need that goal setting, and maybe we are the South's Mecca for entrepreneurship. And we need to just embrace
You gotta
that.
aspire, right?
I like that, but we need to.
It
set
wasn't
that
on the
from
sheet of
top.
paper.
Yeah, set that from the top. I think also, you know, not only getting just new ideas and new people involved and wanting to, you know, pursue new businesses, but continuing to assist new businesses and keep them around and not see people fail. So last night Harvey and I spoke at the Bredesen Center, a room full of talent, and talent that wants to work with us, but we don't have the capacity to employ them or really offer them what they're worth.
Well, we take them for free, though.
But we'll take them for free. Yeah.
We're happy to do that.
But they just to get experience in clean tech and what we do, they do volunteer their time and show up at events and contribute to us. And one person who is on staff right now said, like, I thought I had to move to Portland, Oregon to do this, but I can stay here in Knoxville, and that's what he wanted to do. It's just, again, assistance in being able to capture that talent and keep it here, would be helpful for existing small businesses and allow us to grow.
Part of the ecosystem, I think, is also just the sort of scaffolding of support, and I think we're beginning to get that hierarchy right. Whereas before we've had conversations around this. What is the point of entry for an entrepreneur in this community? Is it Tech 2020? Is it KEC? Is it Propel? We've got all these initiatives, but we're beginning, I think, to sort of right-size that and figure out, where people should go first. And KEC is a great clearinghouse for that. And that used to be a huge negative, I think, because it was sort of territorial. It was like, all right, we've got our budgets and we want to kind of protect those, and we want this guy. No, I want this guy, whatever. And that's not happening, I don't think, as much as it used to. As much.
Can I say something? Okay. Originally, I'm from Ukraine, from Kyiv, Ukraine. If somebody doesn't understand my English, I'll try again, and I'm gonna say something. What is missing around here is a practical thing, how to put Knoxville on a map. So a couple things works. First, it's public exposure. And public exposure you get through TV or radio to begin with. Now, what is public exposure about? Why not to make the Knoxville city of entrepreneurship? Okay, everything doesn't take people who have knowledge to get together, and just like a Shark Tank, everything what they're doing, they're not only investors, they're also professionals, plus they have connections to companies who actually make things happen. And that's it. I don't have anything to do with tech or whatever, but I have a great idea, and I'm just an entrepreneur from ground zero. I just did everything by myself. But I'm an engineer. I don't know anything about the business. So, and how to get to that business? Okay, so two things. Get the Knoxville, and it's something which gonna put Knoxville on the map. Otherwise, when and how, you never know. So that's it.
That's good. It's good input.
Yeah.
So I'd like to add something. So one thing that I've noticed in the past couple of years is observing entrepreneurial scene, entrepreneurial as well, is that this kind of goes to part of the identity that the KEC has and other local groups have, which is, there's a lot of excitement and people get wrapped up around the excitement and the culture, but from the perspective of an entrepreneur, person starting a company, that culture is not, at the end of the day, it's not that meaningful in the sense that if it doesn't drive revenue and it doesn't grow your company, you can have a nice coffee shop, but that's great, right? So really, I think it's very important to stay focused on what we mean by the entrepreneurial community. What are we trying to achieve? What are those metrics? And that's often what I don't hear are what those metrics are. Are we trying to grow local businesses, small businesses, startups? What type of startups? Tech startups, software startups? And then once you kind of identify what your community wants to build, then you can begin asking, how can we start building that? What are the resources that are missing, right? And these are very concrete sort of questions, and I think that's kind of the next step that this community really has to take. So instead of saying, hey, can we get more people excited about businesses and entrepreneurship? Sure, you can do that. Can you create a more lively downtown scene? Sure, you can do that. Well, can you grow a 50-person software company in 2 years? No. Well, why not? Do we want to do that? You know, as a community, does that even make sense? And you know, asking those sort of questions, I think, are really the next step.
May I ask you 3 questions?
Yeah.
Where are you originally from? You just relocated here?
I relocated here over 5 years ago to work for O&L.
Okay.
And so I left O&L about a year ago to do some software consulting in data analytics space. And so, you know, just my observations coming in, I guess, from the outside and looking at this, and being a new entrepreneur at that time, right?
Did you seek out mentors or a support group?
Sure.
Or
Yeah, I mean,
what was your point of entry?
You know, the point of entry, let's say, the KEC, but just, you know, I think I've met like half the people here at some point, you know, and just networking, but it was a networking effort, right? But, you know, again, it's kind of like, well, you can get really excited and you can network with lots of people, but at the end of the day, you can ask, well, am I trying to create a feel-good sort of situation, or what am I trying to do? I'm trying to create a business, right?
Right.
And so it's really those concrete next steps in driving revenue, getting more customers, and, you know, like what this nice lady mentioned, what are the concretes of the business that I really need to focus on, and how do I do that? And, you know, I have reached out. I think a lot of people here have reached out to the more senior business community, you know, Andy from Radio Systems, but, you know, John at Sword and Shield, and lots of other more mature business people. But, you know, what I've noticed is that they're doing their own thing. They're busy. You know, they're still trying to survive and keep their business afloat. And I've noticed this like disconnect, right, from those established businesses and people trying to establish new businesses. And how to bridge that, I think, is going to be very critical. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Russell.
So Paul Johnson founded Y Combinator. Whether or not you like everything he writes or agree with everything he says, he said there are really only 2 metrics that you have to follow if you want to create an entrepreneurial ecosystem. Because there are only 2 things he says that matters. 1, you have to attract smart people, and 2nd, you have to attract rich people. Everything else takes care of itself. And Johnson is very against the sort of top-down idea where government or institutions get involved in this. He said it's an organic process that occurs when you mix enough smart people with enough rich people. So you have to create a community that attracts smart people and attracts rich people, or retains those. You can track that. You can look at FDIC data, for example, and see that the Knoxville Metropolitan Service Area, or MSA, or our counties, we actually have more money on deposit in FDIC insured institutions than Chattanooga. Now, a lot of people are surprised by that. They assume Chattanooga is a richer community because, well, there's more entrepreneurial activity percolating there. We're not anywhere near Davidson County, which has got about 4 times the assets, the financial assets that we do. But Knoxville has a fair amount of wealth, enough at least to light the match under entrepreneurship. There's no doubt about that. And that's you can track that. There are metrics that you can look at. Smart people, I think nobody doubts that we're, and have for a long time, you know, been a magnet for very smart people. I think that's kind of the commonly understood thing about our region. But to get more smart people, again, Paul Johnson would say you have to have the right environment. Smart people don't like places, for example, like New York. They don't like trendy places like Los Angeles. They like places that are quirky. They like places that are interesting. They like places that are, to use his words, more diverse. Quiet coffee shops rather than trendy bars. So, you know, is that happening downtown? I think we mentioned a little while ago that maybe some of that is taking place here, and that's the kind of thing that captures more smart people or makes them want to stay.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. You know, my observations, like especially with O&L, because that comes up a lot in conversations, right? When people say, you know, what about the resources here in East Tennessee? Well, ORNL is going to be an obvious sort of target. And yes, there are a lot of smart people with PhDs from ORNL, you know, and you know, I consider them friends and mentors, right? But, you know, if you go downtown right now, any day of the week, go downtown, go to Remedies, go to your favorite coffee shop, and count how many people from ORNL go there or are there. You know, it's going to be this many. Why? Because they're in Oak Ridge. They're working. The people that choose to work at ORNL more often than not choose there because they want to make a good living, you know, with decent salary, raise family, have a stable job, doing great world research. And so convincing them, you know, convincing them to just leave the lab, leave their comfortable salary, and to start a business or join a startup, in my experience, is very, very difficult. There are a handful of people that are willing to do that, like Brian and Edmund at PYA Analytics are the exception. They're not the norm. And so, you know, it is having those resources that are there, but getting to that culture where people feel comfortable taking those sort of personal risks to do that, I think, you know, is still a huge challenge.
There are a number of people in this room, James, who spent a lot of discussion time talking about how the geography of our area works against us. That, you know, you have a concentration of smart people up in Oak Ridge, that many of them want to live, say, in Hardin Valley, and they're not regularly down here, or they have to be compelled to come down here. So they're not mashing up with people here. So I think you've got a good point there. How do you get people to want to commingle and want to get together from
well, it could very well be that what you need to do is figure out how to leverage what is the reality. I go back to the culture piece. Whatever it is whatever it is. You know, I learned long ago I wasn't going to grow any more hair on my head. So once I figured that out, everything was fine. I mean, we are what we are. I would suggest there's a subset, and it's not whether it's at ORNL, whether it's at UT, or whether it's downtown, that we really ought to think a lot about, and that's the millennial generation, because they're driven, and I'm not one of them. Mary is. The millennial generation is a different generation, and I'll tell you one thing: the people in Chattanooga are working very aggressively at learning how to work, to attract them, to retain them. And to James's point, just one point, you're not, I mean, the salaries and everything else out there, the support system at ORNL is not going to encourage people to come out. But there's technology out there that the Department of Energy doesn't care whether it's commercialized here or in San Francisco or Austin or wherever. What we've got to do is figure out how to get the best of that technology commercialized here, because then the jobs will follow that technology. So I would agree with James. You're not going to get that many people from ORNL. Some of the Bredesen students, perhaps, but
some of it is happening right now and nobody knows about it yet. It just hasn't broken. The story hasn't come out. There's some big stuff coming. Seriously.
You'll tell me, right, Chuck?
Yeah. On the record, Carly.
Well, how do we make that easier? I mean,
how do we make what?
Trying to get, I mean, you've licensed technology from ORNL. I mean, how do we,
he's actually done it.
How do we get that?
Put it to you, Patrick.
Yeah. So, you know, our experience was relatively painless. No, it really was. A lot of people like to talk about how hard it is to work with a lab on licensing technology, but it really isn't that hard. It's just, you know, you identify the technology, you find a use for it, you put in a bid when they put out an RFP, you be smart about, you do your due diligence, you be smart about it, and you be a good negotiator. I mean, it's really, it's just business. I think the key is, does the lab and does the Department of Energy have the commitment and the resources to promote the technology that's available to be licensed and to get it in the hands of entrepreneurs? Or is there an organization like a Tech 2020 or some other organization that can play that role and facilitate the transfer of that technology from the lab to the private sector in this community? That's really what it's about. It's a bandwidth issue. Lab has a lot of pressure to operate on, you know, their budgetary requirements, and, you know, they can't necessarily put forth the effort that would be required to do that at scale. And so somebody else has got to step up, and that's a great role for a community, and that's a great role for an organization like Tech 2020.
And I think
Full disclosure, I'm on their board.
Yeah. I am too. I'm on so many. I'm on any board that doesn't pay. If it pays, I'm. You know, sorry, Charlie. If you remember the old tuna ads. I think it comes back to strategy. It comes back to. I mean, was it you, Patrick, that mentioned 3D printing, or whoever mentioned 3D printing?
Yeah.
I mean, there's clearly an emerging intelligent sector here around 3D printing. How are we going to capitalize on that? The MDF is constantly working with companies. How do we get those companies? And I know there are things, I mean, as Chuck said, there's a lot of stuff going on, but 3D printing is just one example. And I think there are things that can be done. It's not always that easy, and I think it comes back to a concentrated strategy on what of that do we really want, as opposed to, I mean, the lab is the largest science and energy lab in DOE. It's very broad. We don't want, I mean, I think we got to concentrate, focus, and build. We're not just going to become the mecca for entrepreneurship in the South by declaring it. We're going to have to figure out how to build it, right?
I'm going back to celebrating our successes. I don't know if this is true anymore. You probably both know that. At one time, Knoxville was the third largest film production in the country, you know, not too long ago. It's like, how many people know that? You know, how many people know that 3D printing is really emerging here? How many people know, I mean, as far as our water goes, and the assets we take for granted, and the mountains, and all those reasons people would want to live here. I mean, it's affordable to be on the lake, it's recreation, we have some of the best bass fishing, we have some of the best trout fishing. People come from all over the world to trout fish here. That's a huge asset. How many people know that? How many people know that the biggest bass tournaments are here, you know? And we have all these lakes and waterways, and reasons for people to come here from the personal side as well as their business side, and those stories that the rest of, so we have that swagger of an Austin or a Seattle, or, you know, it's a Knoxville, it's a Watertown, it's a recreation, you know, so.
Well, the CEO of Local Motors has moved to Knoxville. I mean, that's, what does that, I mean, you know, a whole new type of making cars. He lived in Arizona and he moved to Knoxville.
Not just him, his family.
Family, that, yeah.
The same was true with the couple that owns Feets in Chattanooga that are doing the 3D
Yes.
printed shoes. They moved from San Diego
Yeah.
to Chattanooga.
Yep.
Well, we're getting close to the end of our time allotment. I would like to give each one of our panelists an opportunity to give us some parting thoughts and maybe some advice to maybe some other entrepreneurs here in the audience. Chuck, you got more?
I'd say seek a mentor and be a mentor. I never really had a mentor when I started Morris Creative 24 years ago. I had some people I knew and I networked and whatever, but for whatever reason, I think sometimes young entrepreneurs are a little embarrassed. It's like they want to figure it all out themselves. I certainly did. I didn't want to be stupid, you know. And but you can go a lot further faster by getting a support system around you. And I think that's what's so awesome about KEC and some of the things that are going on. I was just through the media work. I was a mentor in the Media Works program. And I can't tell you how much I got out of it. You know, I didn't come here thinking I was going to get a thing out of it. And it sounds kind of, you know, arrogant of me to say that, but I thought, you know, I'm just going to be kind of helping some people along and whatever. And I got as much or more out of it than I think my mentees did. So help each other, I guess, is what I was. Sir? Smart butt.
So at the risk of ass-kissing here at the very end, I think the News Sentinel, Carly in particular, but also Amy, who's here I think still, she left, are doing a much better job of recent in covering the startup scene locally. And I think that's helping to get the word out a lot. And so I would like to say thank you for you guys helping to put this event on with the KEC, and I think it's an important conversation to have. So thank you. You know, I think James hit on a really good point earlier about you can have a feel-good community, but in reality, it's about getting revenue. If you're going to grow a business, you got to have revenue. That's it. That is the number one. That's the only metric that really matters, is getting revenue. And you only get revenue if you get to product market fit. If you can identify your customer, you can identify a business model, you know how much your cost of goods are. You do all of those things, and that's what this group, KEC, and what the Anderson Center or Bredesen Center, and you know what some of Tech 2020's programs and others have been all about. It is what is that process? Take advantage of those resources. They've been instrumental for us in getting this business off the ground. We went through the KEC Accelerator last fall that was focused on energy with Mary and some other companies. We participated in a national one for Clean Tech Open that was really, really instrumental for us. And we're in the 10 program right now that Launch Tennessee is putting on. And that's all about Rockefeller habits and focused execution. And so it's really requiring us to really zero in on what's important to the business and getting to that next dollar of revenue, so that you can get to that next dollar of revenue, so that you can get to that next one, and so on. And that's absolutely essential. And there are resources here to help. You just got to take advantage of it.
What's the first question the Sharks ask?
Shark Tank is the worst thing that ever
sold?
happened to entrepreneurship. That show needs to get off the air. As much as I enjoy it sometimes, the valuation question in those shows is miserable.
That's too funny.
They always ask how much have you sold? Yeah. Revenue.
That's appropriate, but the valuations are out of whack.
I agree.
Well, I mean, definitely take advantage of existing resources. They're here. I mean, the Knoxville Entrepreneur Center is a great example. And, you know, having a mentor is important, and then finding partners. You know, be willing to ask for help. Be vulnerable. Certainly, as an entrepreneur, you know, be willing to step outside of your comfort zone often. And I think that, you know, that might be some of your greatest successes is when you choose to do that and, you know, see what you accomplish.
So I'm reminded of a 1986 report. It's from the Southern Growth Policies Board. Yeah, I know. At least it's not World War I. But
I like where this is going.
Yeah. The title was Halfway Home and a Long Way to Go. And if we're going to be the South's Mecca for entrepreneurship, we're about halfway home, but we've got a long way to go, and it's time to get started, develop the strategies, and let's get going, because we've got a lot to offer. And I think that's, to me, is really, I could not believe the number of entrepreneurs in this community, even after running the Tech Transfer Economic Development Industrial Partnering Group at ORNL, after being on the Tech 2020 board, after my years at UT. There are a lot of people pursuing passion here. We got a lot going on here. So we got the foundation. There's missing elements, but we're down the road. Let's get going and become the Mecca for the South for entrepreneurship.
Hear, hear. Well, we appreciate all of you being here, and